and we'll be live on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. And okay, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Typical Skeptic Podcast. An early show today because we have someone from across the pond, someone whose work I look up to very big time. I look up to his work immensely, and that is Guy Anderson. He's the author of Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, but he also is the author of a new book called Conspiracy Theories From Agartha to Zombies. And I wrote a blurb about it. I wrote, today on the Typical Skeptic Podcast, we welcome back returning guest Guy Peter Anderson, author of Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, and his latest work, Conspiracy Theories From Agartha to Zombies. Guy goes deep into one of the most controversial alternative history theories of our time, the idea that a global civilization known as Tartaria was erased from history during a massive reset in the 1700s. We'll explore the connection between Nikola Tesla and his most ancient energy technology, the hidden truth behind the Cabbage Patch Kids phenomena, claims of cloning and repopulation programs, the reset of 1776, Agartha, underworld worlds, and fringe conspiracy theories, and how modern society may be repeating the same cycle today. This is a mind-bending conversation that challenges everything we've been taught about history, technology, and human origins. And just a little bit more about my guest. Guy Anderson is an independent researcher and author known for exploring alternative history, conspiracy theories, and born in Cambridge in 1971. He developed an early fascination with hidden knowledge influenced by family ties to Freemasonry and an interest in Egyptian and history and science. And I put his Amazon link in the description, and also put his Instagram in the description. And with all that said, I'd like to give him a big warm welcome to the show. Back again, Guy. Thank you so much for coming back on. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, and I appreciate you having me back on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, did you want to start off with your new book first? Because I've had you on before, and we kind of talked about Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, and we can kind of go back on that. But you have a new book out, right, called Conspiracy Theories From Agartha to Zombies.
Yes, so I've written a third book. Conspiracy Theories From Agartha to Zombies is my latest title. But after I wrote Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, I wrote a second book called Rise of the Clones. And that's because a survey went out on my first book to see what subject of them all they found the most interesting. And it was the repopulation, the Cabbage Patch babies. So I actually wrote a book on cloning, the origins of cloning, how far back it goes, and leading up to today. So Conspiracy Theories is actually my third book, and that's 87 different rabbit holes, some of my favorite subjects. But Tartaria will always be really the ultimate conspiracy theory or rabbit hole for me. It's the biggest of them all. But my latest book is a deep dive into lots of different subjects like Operation Paperclip and who Elon Musk really is and what happened to Princess Diana, chemtrails, time travel, the Mandela effect, and so on.
I want to know about it all. I want to, everything you said there. I want to know about. I mean, like everybody wants to know what happened to Princess Diana, and everybody would love to know who Elon Musk really is. But like, let's start off with Tartaria because I feel like that's the biggest like thing that's going on as far as like hidden history. Like for people that might not be aware, let's just start at the beginning. What was Tartaria? An empireization or something entirely different? Or what do you think?
Well, Tartaria was the biggest empire that we've ever had. As land mass, it was the Northern Hemisphere, but mainly Russia and Eurasia. It went into Eastern Europe, Western Europe, but their ethos traveled across the world because they shared the technology, which mainly centered around harnessing energy from the ether. But they were technologically advanced. They worked really following, I suppose, what Tesla undertook, and that is frequency and vibration. That energy ultimately is everything, and it can be controlled using frequency. So whether we're healing or moving large objects, everything is ultimately frequency. You okay there?
Absolutely. I'm gonna log in from my
Because
phone.
yeah, I'm logging in from my phone because we have
I'm logging in from my phone because.
All right, we're better now because there was a delay on my computer, so
Right.
I didn't want to mess up the interview, So I logged in from my phone. Yeah. So just don't mind the image. This is the image of me. Okay. So why would the elites? Why do you think they would want to erase an entire global civilization? And I have to ask you. I have a follow up question. That do you agree with like researchers like Michelle Gibson? Like I've had Michelle on my channel, and she believes that there is actually some Tartarian architecture in America here. Like she says, you can see remnants of the Tartarian architecture in some of the buildings here. So, kind of two questions there.
Okay. Have you read any of my work?
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, if you've read my first book, then I've showed buildings in America and talked about a lot of the history of America in the first book. So yes, America's full of Tartarian architecture. It's actually built by the Moors, but the Moors were part of the empire. So that you have Tartarian architecture in every town and city in the world. America's rammed full of it. There's nothing old in America that isn't Tartarian. And it was all built a very long time ago. That's why you'll see a lot of buildings say founded or established on them, and they don't actually have the date of construction. So whether we're talking, Penn Station would be a good example, not just the World's Fairs, but somewhere like Penn Station, it's all Tartarian. We didn't build that. We don't have the technology or the money or the skill now to build something like that. It would take years. So yes, America, along with every other country in the world, is full of Tartarian architecture. And I know Michelle well. She's been on my channel, and I think her work's really important.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. So you definitely have physical evidence. So you're saying Tartaria basically spanned the entire world. Like it was. Do you think it was like the aftercursor to would have been Atlantis or something like that?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I've often referred to it as an echo of Atlantis, but it's actually closer geographically to Hyperborea. So if you look at old maps from the 1500s, you'll see that what the North Sea is today was originally the Hyperborean Ocean. So Hyperborea, which is similar to Atlantis in many respects, is perhaps more closely connected to it. But yes, and if you look at Astana in Kazakhstan today, that is the closest you'll see to how Tartaria or Atlantis or Hyperborea looked. They've recreated it there.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that got me interested in inviting you back on was because I saw your blog post. You put it on Facebook. It was about how Tartaria didn't have kitchens or toilets. Can you get into that a little bit? And why do you think they didn't have that kind of like structure in their homes?
Well, again, this is something that I wrote about in my first book, but a number of them were practicing breatharians. So they were taking everything they needed from the sun. So they did eat, but not like we do. I mean, we've been told that we need to eat 3 meals a day, which obviously is nonsense. You eat when your body tells you to, but with direct sunlight, which we don't really have now, the chemtrailing that's been going on for some time now has made it very difficult for us to get pure sunlight. But direct sunlight on darker skin, you can follow the breatharians and take your sustenance from the ether, if you like. So you don't need to eat anywhere like we do, just snacking on nuts, berries, fruit, things like that occasionally. But there's strong evidence to suggest that they didn't eat, that they were in a much higher vibrational state than we are today.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what originally led you down the Tartaria rabbit hole?
Max Egan. I've been looking into conspiracy theories for 30 years, but just before the pandemic, I started researching the work that Max Egan was putting out there. And he was the first person for me that started talking about Tartaria. And then I started digging more and more and more. And I found that all I met with was resistance. Nobody wanted to talk about it. There was nothing online. I know that you can't find anything truthful on Google or Wikipedia, but there weren't many other places to search. So I started buying old books, old encyclopedias and atlases, and there it is. Tartaria's in there. Populations, culture, rulers, areas, towns and cities. It's all in there. Encyclopedia Britannica, I think from 1771, has a lot of information about Tartaria in there. But then we have the Great Reset, as everybody knows. That was 1776, start of New World Order. And then everything changed. The atlases were changed, the maps were changed. Any reference to Tartaria was removed. And the Jesuits and the Freemasons basically went into every town and city in the world and took any information that referred to it. And it was destroyed.
Wow, that's fascinating. Like, so you believe that the whole reason why they took Tartaria off the maps was the reset of 1776 and this design for a new world order, I guess.
Yeah, but most people know that was the last Great Reset. It's on the back of your American dollar bill. So, you know, Americans are more aware of that than anyone else in the world because you look at it all the time, you know, when you've got handling cash and you've got that constant reminder. So yes, they needed to remove Tartaria because they had the Industrial Revolution coming. There was money to be made from fossil fuel and also controlling us, because if we've got to pay for our fuel and if we now have to pay for travel and pay for medicine, then all of a sudden you can control our well-being too and our movement. And this is the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the parasitic bloodline families. They had slowly built up to a position where they were ready to take full control and then manipulate and suppress the public, the rest of the world. And that's what they did. But they used the Jesuit order because they bankrolled the Vatican when they went bust. They were able to use the Vatican and religion, the Jesuit order in particularly, and then they infiltrated the Freemasons and got them out there as the, you know, boots on the ground to go out there and remove everything. And people were killed. People were taken away and killed for having the information still, you know, within their homes, hidden away. Even in Russia, Red Terror. During Red Terror, people were going into houses looking for information and arresting people, and they were being killed. They were dying on their way to the prisons. They took away priests, or teachers in Russia. Everything was removed. So yeah, it was really important that they wiped it out, because if we were to find out today that 250 years ago we had free electricity, that everybody was healed by going into a cathedral or a church, that we didn't have genocide, we didn't have poverty or famine, we didn't have disease, and we could travel freely around the world in airships without having to use passports and, you know, and being treated like cattle, and almost feeling relieved that we've been allowed to even get on a plane, that we've passed security, that then, you know, people will take to the streets and riot, saying, what have you done? You know, you've lied to us, you've stolen money from us, you've made us ill, you've destroyed the environment, you've destroyed the planet. People would be in an uproar. So it was really important that this has been suppressed. But it's not that whether or not Tartaria existed, it did exist. It's just getting that information out there to the public en masse. That's the hard part, because, as you know, not everybody is able to wake up. So it's difficult to share this sort of information with somebody that, for example, still goes and votes, watches the news, and you know, rolls up their sleeve and takes you know, a COVID vaccine. You're never going to be able to get that information across to those people because they don't question things like we do. They can't see through the matrix.
Absolutely. Yeah. And do you feel like that the time for them to shape everybody's perception on the way things would be, and I think Howdy Mikowski talks about this, were the World's Fair. It seems like they tried to shape the way they wanted everybody to perceive things with the World's Fair. Do you agree with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the World's Fair served two purposes. First of all, they were whitewashing. So they were designed to, you know, a lot of them had exhibits of indigenous peoples, and they were labeled as being primitive and savage. So the first thing they wanted to do was show the rest of the world that that basically the white people that had settled in America were the people that had civilized it, that they were responsible for all the technology, all the incredible buildings, the architecture, the infrastructure, and society as we know it today, that they were fully responsible. So they basically whitewashed history and removed a lot of the significant advancements that were made by the Moors before them. So that was the first thing. They were whitewashing. Secondly, they were brainwashing. They wanted to, at the same time, use these events to showcase technology that was being reverse engineered from the previous civilization, badly reverse engineered in a very crude way, and then actually offering it for sale to the general public. So they were buying technology that was free before, that had been badly reverse engineered and on sale at world's fairs. So it was kind of like a whitewash and brainwash exercise. And of course, all taking place in these incredible Tartarian cities that had been painted white to mask their true age, because they were old. These were old buildings, and they came out with silly claims like they were built from paper mache, which is bizarre because some of the buildings are still standing. And they would claim that they were built within 6 to 9 months. Buildings that had 300 rooms, acres of land with palaces and temples on them, all built by whoever they could find in the local area, using whatever they had to hand at the time. It's absolutely ridiculous. And so at the end of them, because people were questioning, hold on a moment, this isn't paper mache. These aren't temporary structures. Who built these? You've given us the name of the architect, but where are the workmen? Where are they? Where did you quarry the stone from? Where did the skilled labor come from? Where are the artisans in this? Where are the hospital admissions for people that were injured on the site during construction? Where is all of this information? And they didn't have any of it. So they demolished them. Every single one of them had a fire or were demolished. Every World's Fair in the world. And they took place in every major town and city in the world. All of them were destroyed.
That's insane. And I heard that they took billions of dollars. They were huge, like massive, and then they just destroyed them all. But what I wanted to ask about was what happened to the Tartarian civilization, the people that were actually in Tartaria? Like, did they just? Yeah.
There's a little bit of feedback coming through. The people, most of them were killed. So we had civil wars. The civil wars were the Tartarians fighting themselves. So the biggest example would be the Napoleonic campaigns across Europe, where troops were actually fighting each other, even wearing the same uniform. They didn't know, but they were actually killing themselves. So war, genocide. There were lots of acts of genocide that took place. They had famines and outbreaks. The outbreaks they claim were typhoid, syphilis, and cholera, for example, but they weren't. They were radiation poisoning, because they'd used nuclear weapons to wipe out a lot of the buildings. That's why in America you've got melted cities. If you just look at the Badlands and the Grand Canyon, places that have been melted, buildings that have been melted. So a lot of people were actually suffering from radiation poisoning. But they introduced, because we lost between 1776 and 1876, we lost over 3 billion people. In 100 years, 3 billion, leaving a quarter of the population left, and most of those were kids. So what they did was they introduced the Lunacy Act, which meant that if your husband died in battle, then you were classed as insane. That was one of the reasons you could go to an asylum for life. Your husband dies in battle. You immediately get committed to an asylum, and the children are then taken by the state. The children are then moved to wherever in the world needed them. A lot of them were shipped to America. You had the orphan train movement, which conservative estimates put at around 250,000 children were moved from New York, because obviously they arrived by ship to New York. They're then shipped across the Midwest on trains to go and work down coal mines and on farms and in factories. The Industrial Revolution were the children of Tartaria. That was the workforce. But most people think that we can double that to about 500,000. My mother's father was one of the kids. He came from Crimea, which they changed the name, obviously, like they've done with a lot of places, to Ukraine. He came from there over to New York and ended up in Pennsylvania. So, lots of children were redistributed. Loads went to Australia too. Most of them originally were from Russia, around that area. That's where they came from. So that's what they did. The adults killed each other, the male adults, in war. We had several acts of genocide. There were civil wars everywhere. America, obviously, as you know, had one, and they got rid of as many indigenous people as possible and the previous civilization. The children were taken away, and this was going on until relatively recently, with the indigenous people, their children being taken, again, all by the Jesuit order, under the banner of gentrification, civilization, and people practicing the correct religion in their eyes, and abandoning their traditional beliefs and oral stories that are handed down. So that's what they did. They just tried to wipe everything out, all previous history, all the adults, lock them up, or have them killed, or kill each other. Just leave the children, and we can start as a blank sheet, give them a new name, new history, and the past will be forgotten within a couple of generations.
That is scary. They've actually basically, it sounds like they've basically reverse engineered our society to like almost like slow us down or retard us in a way, and make us like, yeah.
Crazy. We are nowhere near as advanced as we were 250 years ago.
Wow, this is crazy. And then how does Tesla tie into this? Was he like someone who had those old world secrets, I guess, or would you say that?
Well, there are lots of weird stories about Tesla. I mean, first of all, we have to question whether or not he existed. There's no video footage of him. That's the first thing people need to look into. If you think that this was someone that was a pioneer of technology, there's video footage of Einstein and Edison, Westinghouse, lots of people that are around at that time that were involved in technology and patenting new inventions. But there's no video footage of Tesla. People will be able to find a few photographs of him, always the same ones. And you can listen to a couple of his lectures and hear him talking online, but there's no video footage. And I spoke to his museum in Serbia about this, and they said that they believe he might have been shy, and that's why there's no video footage, which is strange because allegedly he was paid to talk at dinner parties, to give speeches and interviews. He spoke very openly and freely. So I don't believe he was a shy person. I think that's just silly. But there'll be people that are watching this that will say, of course he existed. My answer is always the same to that. Thank God you met him. The only way you could possibly say that is if you met him. So can you send me a photograph of you together? Because I'm looking for evidence, because I want him to have existed. So that's the first thing. That there are reasons to doubt his existence, a bit like Napoleon, Leonardo da Vinci, William Shakespeare. A lot of these people are characters that are just created. So that's the first thing with Tesla. The second thing is, if he did exist, then there is no way he was getting this information from Venus. That's what he states. The Venusians were communicating with him, and he was downloading information from them when he had visions. They were like a blackout, and that his mother also received these visions, and she invented sort of labor-saving devices that typically evolved around the kitchen, and that's where he inherited this gift from, allegedly. So if we follow his narrative, his story as he put it out there, he was receiving information on this technology from Venus. So you can make your own conclusion there. Do you think he was communicating with aliens? I don't.
I don't. I think something's up with the whole story, and I love the fact that you question everything. And not only do you question everything, it's not that you're a conspiracy theorist. It's almost like you're a conspiracy realist, where you believe that a lot of these things that we think are conspiracy are actually true, and that we've just been like hoodwinked basically our whole lives, which seems to be what the case is.
Well, people often sort of give the term conspiracy theorist a bad rap. And they will sometimes say that it was created by the CIA. If you didn't believe how JFK was assassinated, then you were a conspiracy theorist. But of course, that's not true. The term was used a lot longer ago than that. So that first of all, that isn't true. The CIA didn't invent this term. A conspiracy is a group of people acting against mankind. They're conspiring against us. So they are conspiracies. So when a group of people set about to do something like COVID, like what's going on with this pretend war in Iran, anything like the chemtrailing, anything like that, that is a conspiracy. That is a small group of people conspiring against us. And a conspiracy theory is research when you theorize what this conspiracy is ultimately about, and you try to find evidence to support it, and at the same time you try to find things to debunk it too, because you don't want to put your name to something that clearly appears to be a misdirection or something that's just put out there to distract. So they are conspiracy theories, but a lot of these conspiracies become true, but they're still conspiracies because they are people conspiring against mankind.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things you mentioned in your bio is that you were connected to the Masons. Like, did you learn anything in there that like they know or anything like? And how long were you a Mason?
Yeah, so I joined when I was in my early 30s. My dad had joined when I was a kid, and I was fascinated by it because he always used to say that they ran the world, which they do, but there are people obviously higher up than the Freemasons. There are people that sit ultimately at the top, but bottom line is they're all Freemasons. So if you want to know who controls the world, they will be a Freemason. And I guess most people know that are watching this know that Trump has no power whatsoever. He's just a puppet. I mean, most people know how it works. Yeah. Above him are the Freemasons, but of course, sat at the very top, there's always one particular person or being, and it's always the Rothschilds. You can always follow the pattern to the Rothschilds. They always sit right at the very top.
Yeah, they're actually, it's crazy. It's like a lot of us in the conspiracy realm, we talk, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just got excited about this because I wanted to say a lot of us have been talking about the Rothschilds for years. And then what happened? They fucking excuse my language, they showed up in the Epstein files. They're actually in the Epstein files. And I was like, holy heck. I was like, everything we've been talking about is actually true. And this really does tie back to the Rothschilds. Like, and I believe that the wars were really bankers' wars, and I believe they're somewhere, they're in control of it. And, I question Israel a lot too for what they do, and their actions on the main stage.
Israel is basically the Rothschilds' playground. They own Israel. It was given to them. That's the Balfour Declaration. That was put together by a private club. The most secret society in the world is Chatham House in London. That's where all the American top officials, defense contractors, oil magnates, anyone, head of MI5, head of CIA, they're all part of Chatham House. They've got headquarters in London and also New York. So that's where the decisions are made. That's where the Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, everything filters down from Chatham House. So that's the most powerful secret organization in the world. And of course, that was bankrolled by JP Morgan. That's a Rothschild relation. But the Rothschilds run everything, and they go back to Amun-Ra. Amun-Ra is who you are talking about in the Old Testament. That's how back they go. So the Rothschilds run everything, and the person who controls Donald Trump is Nathan Rothschild. That's Trump's boss.
Doesn't Rothschild mean Red Shield too, or something like that?
Yeah, it means a lot of things, but Red Shield is one of them. But actually, it goes back to Amun-Ra, who was Marduk, the Anunnaki. the most powerful pharaoh of them all. He's who Zeus is based upon in Greek mythology. Zeus, the god in the Old Testament, Amun-Ra and Marduk, the son of Enki, they're all the same person.
I love that you took it there. I just got to say, I love that you took it there. I'm a firm believer that the Anunnaki walked the earth. What do you feel about this? Because I know you question a lot, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if you thought that some of the texts were misinterpreted or mistranslated. So yeah, where do you stand on the story of the Anunnaki?
Well, anybody who's interested in the Old Testament or religion at all, any religion, then you need to read the Sumerian texts. They're the oldest that we have. That's the oldest text, and in there you'll see the story of our creation. You'll see the Great Flood. It's all in there. So yeah, everything's based upon that. So there was no religion. People worshipped the sun. They worshipped the you know, animals, the you know, the sky, the seas, the oceans. That's what we worship. We were sort of pagan, I suppose. But the sun is what's worshipped, and most people know that Jesus is based upon Horus. Horus is the grandson of Amun-Ra. But so yeah, there was no religion. It's all made up. But it's a brilliant way of controlling people. You know, give people 10 commandments to follow, which are 10 rules. Most of them, you know, repeat themselves. Number 10 being thou shalt not kill. And then in the name of religion, more people have been killed just for them having a different point of view than any other reason in existence. More people have died because of religion than any other reason in the world, yet they have 10 commandments, and one of them clearly states, thou shalt not kill.
I
absolute joke.
I absolutely agree with you 1,000%. I always say a big problem for like a lot of the problems that are happening in the world today are the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. If you look at the Middle East, they're all fighting each other over this, like, you know, and it's crazy because I feel like all their deities go back to the Anunnaki. You know?
Yeah, they do. The stories have all been hijacked, but religion was important because it controls people. You go along, you do what you're told, you give them money, and providing you do everything they say and keep giving them money, they'll get you into heaven because they're on first name terms with God. So you know, just do what you're told. But of course, it's nonsense. You know, anybody who's read the Bible, and I'm ordained. Anyone who's read the Bible knows that Jesus said that you don't go somewhere to pray. You do it on your own in solitude, and you don't listen to someone else telling you how to pray. That's a false prophet. Yet every Sunday, off they go to church. They listen to someone read a book they've never read themselves properly. And of course, the net result of that is you'll be asked to hand over money to the most wealthiest, powerful organization out there that just, for whatever reason, always needs more money. The Roman Catholic Church, for example, today could end poverty. It could end world poverty if it wanted to, but it doesn't. It keeps the money for itself. You know, they're vile. I mean, they're satanic. The Vatican is satanic. So yeah, they've taken the story from Sumerian text. And anybody that's interested in this really does need to look at the Sumerian text. You can't just regurgitate things from the Bible without knowing where it's from, and a lot of people do that. But Amun-Ra, when Amun-Ra fled, he left everything behind. The power, the most powerful pharaoh and godlike being that ever existed, left everything behind to his children, and he called the children of Ra. From then on to be known as the Rothschilds.
Oh my God, that's insane! Holy shit, I didn't know that. Like that, and so the Rothschilds are wow, that's insane.
They're Anunnaki. The Rothschilds are Anunnaki. They can't mate with us.
That's you know, someone says that someone who comes on my show says that the whole state of Israel is based on the Anunnaki. I would would say that the Anunnaki had control of the whole Middle East. I would say probably, right? Or,
yeah, well, you know, yes, today, but because the Anunnaki bloodline are the 13 bloodline families. So yes, the Rothschilds own Israel. It was given to them. That's the Balfour Declaration. It was given to them. So you know, it was taken. Land was taken from other people and given to the Rothschilds, so they had a home. They're not even Jewish, you know. They converted. They have no Jewish blood in them. They're fake. They're liars. and they've used religion to get what they need, and they'll use anything to get what they need. But the original Middle East is America, the Middle East that we're referring to at the moment, with Iran and Iraq and so on. That's the new Middle East. America is the original. The Nile is the Mississippi.
Wow, how did you come to that conclusion? That sounds fascinating.
Well, lots of people more intelligent than me have been studying this for a very long time. But one good example would be the wood that the Ark is made from. Well, that's the gopher tree. It's made from gopher wood. You can only find that in Florida. But if you have a look at all of your towns and cities in America, you'll find that you have every single town and city from the Middle East already there. But the person to look into who's researched it far more than me is Charles Ross. He's been on my YouTube channel. He's got a good presence on Instagram and Facebook, but he also has a YouTube channel, and I think on that he's called Teacher Charles. But he's the one that really joined all the dots together. So, but to go back to your original question, yeah, I mean the Rothschilds, they control everything, and what you're seeing now is a fake war out there that's just designed to drive up the cost of living, in particularly reduce travel, restrict our movement, make it too difficult to put fuel in the car. So it's pushing us closer to 15-minute cities, and it will cause flights to go up, so people won't travel so much. And then obviously food goes up and everything else because transportation costs increase because of fuel pricing. So it's about 15-minute cities. So what Trump is doing now is just it is just basically putting the World Economic Forum's Agenda 2030 into action, because that's who he reports to. Ultimately, World Economic Forum is controlled by the Rothschilds as well. So that's all that's happening. We're seeing Agenda 2030 play out. And the Middle East, the reason they target that particular area more than anywhere else is nothing to do with the Bible. It goes back further than that, because in Iran, for example, you've got the largest pyramid in the world, and you've got incredible archaeology out there that they can't explain. So they've been targeting it for a very long time. They eventually want to flatten everything that has archaeology that can't be explained. But what's going on right now, it's like 9/11 was to get rid of Gilgamesh's tomb. What's happening now is the Rothschilds need to push Agenda 2030. So they're getting their puppet Trump to cause the conflict. Well, basically, let's be honest, kill thousands of children in the Middle East. That's what he's doing. His children.
Yeah, because what is going on in Lebanon, I was going to say, is really sad. Like it seems like Israel is hitting Lebanon hard. I know you say a lot of it's not true, but it seems like I don't know what they're showing us and what's real and what's not, but like it makes people get a really bad perception of Israel. You know what I mean? And then you see the Gaza.
Well, they should have. They should have. It's a disgusting place.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm half Lebanese, but I'm fourth generation American. So I've been here my family's been here for decades, and my family grew Mediterranean. My mom's Italian and Greek. And so I have a lot of ties to that area, as far as history goes. I always find the history there interesting, but
Israel is basically a country that acts like an Amazon distribution center for the Rothschilds. So they ship weapons through Israel, money through Israel, people are trafficked through Israel, and it's always been used as a place, a home of Judaism, somewhere that they could call home, their own country. But that isn't what it's about. Now, the innocent people that live there won't know this, but the people that run Israel, the Rothschilds, they know exactly what they're doing with the place. It is just a hub, a distribution place for them to be able to have their own country in which they can orchestrate various nefarious acts through. So that's all Israel is. But if you look at what Israel is connected to, the suffering, look at the Gaza Strip. You've got, what is the average age on there? 14 years old. And they've been bombing that forever. They need to give that back. They need to give the land back.
Well, it's not just that, but now they're using Palantir drones and shit like that. I don't know if you heard about that. It's pretty much mainstream news. They're using Palantir technology in Gaza. Israel is, and and name the guy. I'm trying to think of his name.
He's a freaky man, isn't he? Very odd looking man. He reminds me of Doc from Back to the Future.
He looks like a weirdo. Yeah. He looks really weird.
Yeah, he's just a puppet. He's another puppet. But yeah, that's what they do. They put these cranks on TV and present us with them, and they're just puppets. A bit like Elon Musk. Elon Musk wouldn't begin to be able to tell you how one of his own cars work. They're just puppets. And that's what they do. So yeah, we don't know if what we're seeing is real. There's no way of knowing that. Are we watching CGI? But a lot of it will be fake. But I have no doubt that innocent people are being killed. That's normally what happens during a war. Innocent people die.
Absolutely.
Children, more often than not, is kids.
Yeah. What I wanted to get into was your new book. It's called Conspiracies From Agartha to Zombies. I love that. I love that title. And
thank you.
Let's start off with Agartha. So do you believe? What do you feel about Inner Earth?
Yeah, I think we live on a lump of rock that's a bit like a piece of Swiss cheese. There are lots of civilizations that talk about different beings, if you like, or different peoples that live underground, and that's been going on forever. So we've got Agartha, Hyperborea, Shambhala. All of these places are supposed to be connected to Inner Earth, and entrances at the North Pole, entrances at the South Pole, and so on. So yes, I think there is strong evidence to suggest that people have throughout civilization gone underground. They even in Ireland, little island, Ireland, in just off the coast of England, even there they have a civilization that became known as the fairies, the fairy folk that actually lived underground. So it's in every culture, in every corner of the world, and cultures that have never communicated with each other will tell stories. The Native Americans do. You've got the ant people. All across the world, people talk about civilizations that went underground or have always been underground. So yes, and then of course we've got the Admiral Byrd and what he wrote about what happened during his expedition. So yes, there's definitely something going on underneath us. But I don't think it's just under the land. I think it's also underwater. You've got to sort of get into the mindset, I suppose, that everything's an inversion. So when you're told to look up at the sky for a UFO, you need to be looking down. They come from underwater. And when we're told that what's going on in Antarctica, we're constantly being told, what do you think is going on in Antarctica? This is what I think is there. This is what happened during this expedition. We've got to invert that. So we need to know what's going on at the North Pole. That's where the Northern Lights are. That's where the events take place that are unusual. You're not allowed to fly over there either. So I think we need to sort of reverse everything that we're told, flip it on its head, whether we're talking about people, countries, aliens, civilizations, invert everything. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot going on underneath us. I don't think we're on a ball that's spinning around. I don't know what we're on, but I don't believe anything NASA puts out. So I think, yeah. So I think that there are civilizations underneath us, and that a lot of people have written about this. And in fact, I think it was in Germany, up until I think 200 or 300 years ago, it might have been a little bit older than that, but they actually stopped people trading with the civilization and the underground civilization. They were trading. They were coming up to the surface and trading goods with each other. And they actually sealed all the entrances and stopped it. They said that you're no longer allowed to trade with them. And that's been written about. People have written about that. So yeah, I think that's been going on for a long time, forever. I think there have been underground civilizations. There's evidence of that throughout the world. And now there's this desire, isn't there, to build underground again. People are building bunkers in Los Angeles. You've got the silo development. What's that going to be? 149 stories or something underground. So we're constantly looking to go under instead of living up on the surface. And if you think about it, the pollution that we have up here, the damage to our atmosphere that's been caused, the chemicals in the rain, and and the poisoning of our lands, maybe underground is safer.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that is. One thing I was going to ask you about was in the new book Conspiracies from Agartha to Zombies. You said you touched on Elon Musk, who he really is, and the death of Princess Diana. Can we get into both of those too?
Yeah, well, Princess Diana is the perhaps for me a little bit closer to home, because I used to drink in the same pub as her. She was from Northampton, and she used to drink in a pub called the Fox and Hounds, which was near Althorpe, the country estate. And my friend's wife was the manager of that pub. Used to see her in there. I never actually saw her in there, but I'd always miss her. But yeah, so that's what really happened there. I mean, there are rumors surrounding whether or not Harry is hers. I do believe that he is. And then what happened when she died? It took them 45 minutes to get from the tunnel to hospital, which was a 5-minute journey. So I think they were driving around until until they'd got rid of her, basically, because she walked out of the car. She had to be helped, but she stepped out of the car and stepped into the back of the ambulance, but arrived at the hospital dead. So there's something strange going on there. Some people think that she's still alive, that she's out there somewhere, still alive, having different, maybe change of name and then cosmetic surgery. So she's got a sort of different look to her, so not as easily recognizable. Some people believe that. We don't know, do we? But the reason that he married Diana, even though they were distant cousins, is because of the inbreeding problem. He couldn't marry Camilla and have children with her because they were too closely related, and they've had problems over the years. Queen Victoria, perhaps more so, with haemophilia from inbreeding, and then we had the Habsburgs that were ultimately quite deformed as a direct result of it, because they try and keep power within their own bloodline, and inbreeding makes a stronger person. Ultimately, they're physically stronger if they're inbred, and they believe that this is important, so they don't want to lose control of their bloodline, and they want the strength from inbreeding too, but leads to quite often deformities and problems. Mental capability doesn't seem to be as strong. So Diana, they sort of, if you like, they marry a womb essentially, and once the children get to a certain age, they'll divorce. And you'll see that this isn't just Charles and Diana, but also Andrew and Sarah, and also Princess Anne, their sister. The same thing. They always follow that same pattern. They'll actually have children with somebody else and then divorce. And it's always the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds ultimately are behind that. But with Princess Diana, people believe that she was pregnant, and she was pregnant with Dodi Fayad's child, a Muslim. They obviously they believe that was going to cause issues, even though Charles is the patron of the Islamic Centre in England at it's either Oxford or University, Oxford or Cambridge University, where it's based. I can't remember which one, but despite that, at the time they didn't want Princess Diana, as she was still called, to be carrying a Muslim baby, and they thought it would cause problems, so they needed to get rid of her. Now, whether or not she was killed, I don't know, but she was alive when she got out of the car. We just don't know what happened next.
Well, there is one video that Robert Steffer made, the anthropologist, and he made one about it was about the Queen of England, and he called her the Queen of Islam, because he said that they have ties. Like, he said somehow the Queen of England has ties to the Prophet Muhammad. But I see what you're saying. They wouldn't want that out there to the public, because they're trying to give off a certain perception of like being white and being powerful and being in control. It seems like that's what they want to they want to portray, at least, right? So, and they want to inbreed to keep that going and control the people. right? And they don't want to get like they consider us impure, like right, like they consider themselves pure. They consider us like as lower standard than them.
Yeah, I mean, we are slightly different to them in several respects. I mean, we have a different DNA structure. We have a different blood group to them. Nobody knows what their blood group actually is, but they do carry their own blood when they travel. But we don't know what that is. But they can't mate with they can't mate with us. So they do have to marry someone or have children with someone who is connected to them, that is related to them, carrying the same blood. But it can't be too close because of the issue with deformity. Although, having said that, if you go back to Amun-Ra, Osiris and Isis, they were brother and sister, and obviously Isis is the mother of Horus, who people turned into the character Jesus. So incest does go back all the way, but obviously it causes problems too. And I don't think we have the technology now, not publicly at least, to be able to control this. Obviously, Enki was a master scientist and very good at tweaking DNA, manipulating. I don't know if they're able to do that today, or certainly whether or not that's more of a recent thing with companies like Clonaid. But I don't know if this was possible 10, 20, 30 years ago. They've been cloning as they are today in different forms since just after the Second World War. But the technology today, I don't know if it is up to what they were able to achieve when they created us, a quarter of a million years ago. I don't know. But there are problems with inbreeding. And the Queen Victoria was and the Habsburgs, as I said earlier on, were probably the best examples of that. All of your children having haemophilia, and then with the Habsburgs, the jaw out here, not being able to talk properly, and not being able to walk until they were sort of 4 or 5 years old, and then most of them died because they were so inbred. So yeah, it's sort of farming out a womb, isn't it, to an extent? But so we know that their blood is different to ours, that their DNA is slightly different. They have an alien blood group, alien as in unknown origin. So they aren't the same as us. And a good example of that is that there is no empathy. They don't have empathy. So you'll see that they don't really know how to love. They're not very creative. So if you listen to Charles talk, although he's very boring, they call him King Charles. Obviously, he's not really a king, but Charles Windsor, the current fake king of Britain, he doesn't appear to have any empathy. He definitely doesn't know what love is. He doesn't seem to have that in him. And then you get the extremes where you'll get one of the Rothschilds that's is more arrogant. Again, no empathy. They tend to show psychopathic traits and very strong traits of narcissism. So Trump would be a good example of that. Obviously, on his mother's side, he's a Rothschild. So you'll see this sort of arrogance and an inability to empathize with anyone at all. A lot of narcissism going on there, but also at the same time, elements of stupidity as well. They're not that intelligent because of the inbreeding. So they might be stronger. They might be able to live a little bit longer than we can, but they don't have creativity. They don't understand love. They don't have empathy, and they do tend to be not that intelligent. They might be able to use big words because of where they're educated and the circles they mix in. They might be able to stand up and give a lecture, but they won't understand what they're talking about. And that's why, Prince Charles is known as being a little bit thick. King Charles now, why he's known as being a little bit thick. They used to dread it when he would write to a newspaper and want his letter published, because they said they couldn't even read his handwriting. He's really not a very intelligent person at all. And then obviously you've got Trump, who anybody that watches him knows that he's not very intelligent either. So that's one of the problems with these people, that there's a lack of intelligence, but they've got incredible authority and power, and that's a dangerous combination.
But you touched on something I think is really important. So Trump is actually a Rothschild on his mother's side.
I thought everybody knew that.
No, I did not know that. That's news.
Yeah, they're all Rothschilds. You don't get in power unless you're either indebted to them by. I mean, fair enough. He owes the Rothschilds millions of dollars. He'll never be able to repay it. Was it twice they bailed him out, wasn't it? Because he took his father's business and sunk it into the ground twice, and each time the Rothschilds bailed him out. So he'll never be able to repay that debt, and that's why he does what they tell him to do, and that's why they put him in as president. Obviously, you go through the show. People actually think your votes get counted. Of course, they don't. They've never counted your votes. That's never happened. And I know that from a government minister that worked with David Cameron, who was the British Prime Minister. He worked very closely with him daily sharing an office with him. And I know firsthand that the votes go into the bin. He was the secretary of the lodge that I joined in the City of London. So you've got these sort of puppet rulers, but anybody of any significance, like Trump and like we had here, Tony Blair changed Britain permanently, how Britain operates. Tony Blair, even now, hasn't been the prime minister for years, but still now controls the British government. He's the one introducing digital ID. He was the one that introduced the lockdown and the vaccine mandate. Whatever you look at, whatever bad is going on right now, whatever the people of the country are objecting to, Tony Blair in the UK will be behind it, not hidden away, publicly behind it. He's a Rothschild. So they put themselves in positions of power. So the British monarchy, for example, and all European monarchy, since the late 1700s, early 1800s, have been Rothschilds. Queen Victoria was a Rothschild. Charles is a Rothschild. Elizabeth II, a Rothschild. All world leaders are Rothschilds. They don't just put anyone in. They put family in place, and they seed the heir to the throne. So you've either got to be someone very influential with incredible wealth and power, and get in because they allow you to, connected with them in business, for example, which they've done in France. Pompidou would be a good example of that. The president of France back in the day, he worked for the Rothschilds Bank. He was a manager for them. He gets promoted, ultimately becomes president of France. His boss is still the Rothschilds. So it's very clever. So they all work for them, or they're all related. But yeah, Trump on his mother's side that's a Rothschild bloodline. Just same as Tony Blair, same as our royal family. They're all Rothschilds.
That's mind blowing. I'm trying not to talk as loud because the audience said my mic was loud, so I moved myself away from the mic. And so, what about Elon? I get excited about this topic, though. And let me just tell you, this is a mind blowing conversation, and people in the audience agree. So thank you. But so who is Elon, and what do we need to know about him? What do you think is going on with him?
Well, first of all, with Elon Musk, I would say to people, have a look at his mother. If you want to know what he's about, obviously he's satanic. His practices are satanic. I mean, X, for example. I mean, that's Saturn. He worships Satan, or at least he thinks he does. Now, this might be for our benefit. He might not actually. None of these parasites, whether we're talking about Trump, Rothschild, Musk, whoever, they might not actually really worship the devil. But they want us to think that they do without telling us. So it remains a conspiracy. But they're following the same route that you would. X is the most obvious, isn't it? Calling your company, calling your child, and obviously changing Twitter to X. X is a platform where he allows people to say whatever they like, where he can then share that information with various intelligence services. So he can say, well, we'll use my platform to allow everybody to say whatever they want, and then we can see who's saying what. We've got it all captured here on one side. We're not going to suppress anybody. We're not going to censor anything. We're going to let them do it here so we can have them all in one place. People think that you can go on Telegram and other platforms and that you're going to be protected. it's nonsense. They read absolutely everything. People don't realize, if you think about it for a moment, we're talking about incredible technology. And within these military departments and deep state black ops departments, you don't think they can crack Telegram? Really? Come on.
You know what? I can tell you this. I found myself getting enraged off of like posts I would see on X. Like I would go to just like post like whatever episode I was about to do on X, and then I would see the article. And every time I would go on X, it would be something about the immigration in the United States and the Muslims trying to supposedly take over. And it's almost like they were trying to rage bait people into a race war. You know what I mean? But like then you can look at like the policies of the Biden administration or whoever. I don't think it was Biden. I think it's like you said, it's people in higher charge who let millions of people into this country and, other countries too, like England and, but like, I think we can all get along. I think this is done by what I'm saying is I see Elon rage baiting people. And then on the bigger issue, I feel like they're trying to, rage bait people into like a civil war or something like that. So they use the platform to like funnel information that they want to show people. If that makes sense. Do you think that's kind of what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, they are using the oldest trick in the book, divide and conquer. If you can get two groups of people that actually believe in exactly the same thing, the Muslim faith and the Christian faith is almost identical, yet people don't look into it closely enough to see that. And I was giving a talk on Tartaria a few months ago, and I had someone come up to me and say, well, the problem is the Muslims just want to turn England into a Muslim state. And I said, well, that's interesting. How many Muslims have you spoken to that have said that? And she said, well, none. I said, so you've just decided that that's what they want? Or is it possible that the government and the world leaders are doing this? So there's hatred between the two largest populations. So if you can get the two largest sectors of Britain or America to hate each other, you can sit back and watch while they literally ultimately kill each other. And I kept saying to this person, you're coming out with this stuff because of the propaganda you're seeing, but you haven't actually spoken to any Muslims to say, do you want England to become a Muslim state? Because you'll actually find they'll say, I'm not interested. No, I don't really care. It's not a thing. And she said, you don't know that. How many Muslims do you know? Well, I married one 30 years ago. All my in-laws are Muslim and my wife. So I do know quite a bit about it. And they've got no idea what's going on either. All we do know is that the immigration that we're seeing actually is for a completely different reason. This is the new army. They're going to be implementing new laws with Agenda 2030 that your boots on the ground, your police and your military are not going to want to enforce, because they're going to have to enforce it on friends and family, their own kin, their own people. So the best thing you can do is bring military fighting aged men. They're always young men. You don't see kids, you don't see elderly people. There aren't many women. Bring them over to the country, train them, put uniforms on them, and when the time is right, get them out onto the street, because they've got no loyalty whatsoever to that country or the people in it. That's what they're doing here. That's what they're doing there. That's what they're doing everywhere in the world. So that's why we're seeing these people come over. It's got nothing to do with them fleeing a war-torn country and seeking asylum. The governments are bringing them over here instead. It's all a psyop.
Well, it's so sinister. It's really fucking sinister what they're doing,
Absolutely. Yeah, this is Agenda 2030. They're going to cram us into 15-minute cities, take away even owning a pet. They're going to make that impossible. And we've got two options. One, we can say, no, I couldn't care less what you think about anything. I'm not interested in any of your rules. I'm not playing. And then we can look into the straw man and say, well, hold on a minute. All your communication isn't to me. It's to a dead legal fiction. Stick it up your ass. That's what we've got to do. Or we can go along with it. We can bend the knee and say, well, we'll do whatever you tell us to do, because we don't want to get told off. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to pay a fine for something. My answer is, well, I'm not paying a fine. No one has authority over me. You can shove it all up your ass. And that's what we need to do. So that's really where this is headed. We've got this push now to ultimately depopulate. That's what they do when they reset. They get rid of about 80% of the population. And the Georgia Guidestones stated this. Agenda 2030 states it. We were referred to recently as useless eaters, that we have overpopulated. We haven't. The world is underpopulated. We have the opposite problem. Most land is uninhabited. You see that when you travel by plane. So it's all a lie. So I think what we can expect at some point in our lifetimes, perhaps sooner rather than later, is a catastrophic event. I think we're going to see World War III play out. All friends, bear in mind, these are all friends working together. There aren't any enemy states. They're all mates. They're just following a script. You're bad cop, I'm good cop. And that is it. They'll depopulate and they'll start again. But this time, I think they've got AI and robotics to a point where they're not going to repopulate anywhere near as much as they needed to before, because last time when they wiped out over 3 billion people, we had the Industrial Revolution coming. So we needed an infrastructure. We needed people. And that's where the Cabbage Patch babies, the cloning happened, and the orphan train movement. They needed kids out there to actually go and work in the factories and down the mines to power the Industrial Revolution and get everything back up and running again, but in a more crude way that earned certain people a lot of money and also gave them control at the same time over everything. If you can control energy, then you can control everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And you read my mind with where you were going with that, because I was just going to ask you what you thought about the current influx of robotics and AI. It's funny. It's like people can go on. I think they can go on Amazon now and buy their own robot, or it's getting close to that. And in some cities here in the United States, they have robots delivering food. And it's funny, these little robots, they have like a personality. And then I've seen over in Asia where these people are training robots to do martial arts, and like the robots are kicking the humans' ass. So like where we're going with that, but that scares me.
Yeah, sure. They had them where I used to live. Actually, about 5 years ago, we started seeing those robots around, and I'm not saying that we should go out there and be destructive at all, but I just think that if we're using something, if we're using a service that uses those robots, then we perhaps need to stop using that service. And I'm not saying next time you see one in the street, kick it into the road and watch a car run it over. I'm not saying that for one minute. But what I am saying is, if you're about to go and order something, it's going to be delivered by a robot or a drone in some cases, choose somewhere else, because you've just cost a person their job.
Yeah.
When you support this. Now, I know that a lot of things are made in factories that are automated, and we can't do anything about that. We can't go to a man up the road and say to him, can you make me a smartphone, please, in your shed? We know that that's not possible, certainly not realistic. But there are some things that we shouldn't be replacing. Driverless cars. They're on about having them in London. Driverless taxis. Well, people will want to use them because they'll think it's a novelty. What they won't consider is the fact that has lost somebody else a job, just so you can have an Instagram moment and tell people you went in a driverless taxi. Someone had to lose their job. So that's what we've got to do. We've got to boycott certain companies, certain businesses and organizations, and say that we no longer support you. You imagine if everybody on Monday morning said they weren't going to go to McDonald's, if every single person in America said we're not going to McDonald's today. Now, you'll have people that are too lazy to cook, and people that no matter what you present them with won't take any notice and will still eat that kind of junk anyway. But imagine if you could get everybody into a position where for 24 hours they boycotted Walmart, your local Apple store or Starbucks or whatever. Imagine the power. We could take back control tomorrow if we worked together. But while we're fighting over whose God is right and whose is wrong, what color of your skin and what is the color of your skin, and does that matter? Your sexuality, what soccer team you support. While we're worrying about all of this stuff that doesn't matter and has only been put out there to cause division, what we're not doing is saying, okay, we're never going to agree on everything. There are 999 gods out there. But of course, they're all wrong apart from mine. The rest don't exist. We're never going to think logically like we should do. We've just got to put our differences to one side and say we all share one thing in common. And that is our lives are being made harder by a small amount of people. And we can do something about that if we stop being lazy.
Absolutely. And the whole thing with Walmart, it never ceases to amaze me because they really knock out the private businessman, the mom and pop store that you see on the corner. So therefore they control the price, and then they also control whatever's going into the food that you're getting. So like if the government wants to put some kind of bullshit in there, which we know they already do, they can easily do that and then just funnel it through Walmart, where a large part of the portion is gone, a large part of the population is gone. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, it's the same here, and it is laziness, and also this false economy. So, if you go to a proper butcher's to get meat, you might pay a bit more for it, but you're not going to need to eat as much because the nutritional value is far greater. So instead of having to shovel all this food down you to feel full and satisfied, you actually, if you're eating real food, you don't need very much of it because the nutritional value is so much greater. At the same time, you've got more control over what you're ultimately consuming. So yes, it might cost a little bit more, but you're not going to need to eat as much. So you've got to really look at that. And if you're buying all of your food, or your meat and vegetables, fruit and so on from Walmart, then you're not actually eating food anyway. You might as well go outside and eat dog shit. There's nothing. In fact, it would probably be better for you because you're not taking in chemicals, dangerous chemicals. Most fruits are coated in them. So I think, if you want to go to somewhere like Walmart to do your food and grocery shopping, then you've got to bear in mind that you are going to suffer from. You're going to have problems later on in the line. These things are linked to cancer, dementia, all sorts of different diseases. And if you can't be bothered to drive another 10 minutes to a butcher to get real meat, or support your local farm shop, or even attempt, if you're able to, grow your own produce, then you can't really blame anybody else for the fact that you're not well, or you're struggling with your mental health, or you become critically ill. You've got an option, you've got a choice, and that choice is you are what you eat. If you want to eat shit, then that's what your internal organs will become, and that's what your whole system will become. Within 30 days you can completely regenerate every living cell in your body. So if you start eating clean and proper food today, not only will you feel better, you'll live a lot longer, you won't go to the doctors so often, and you might just put another nail in the coffin of one of these big companies like Walmart that have destroyed the high street. They've destroyed the baker, and the butcher and the greengrocer. They have destroyed those. So I think it's time we destroyed them. And let's turn this around. And it might mean that, now that you are paying twice the price maybe for a decent piece of meat, maybe you won't have as much money to go and have a $5 coffee every day from Starbucks, or one of these ridiculous bloody coffee shops that serve you crap, that they're exploiting people across the world and destroying rainforests and people's environments, and to give you a second-rate cup of coffee that isn't even fit for the bin, but it looks cool, and you're going to Starbucks. I think we need to look at where we're spending our money, who we're giving our money to, and what we're ingesting. So do, make some brave choices. Say, do you know what? I'm actually going to drive 10 minutes further up the road today to get my fruit and vegetables, or to get real meat, and try it for a month. And you'll find that you don't need to eat as much. And for all the people out there that just eat fast food or get food delivered to them, the time it takes for you to wait for that food to arrive from ordering it You could have made something real. You could have made real food. And if you say you don't have time for that, unless you're working sort of 2 shifts a day, you've got a full-time job and a part-time job, what is it you're doing that's taking up so much of your time that you have no ability to make something to eat yourself? Now, if the answer to that is that you're spending a lot of time on social media or scrolling on your phone, then you might have got your priorities a little bit skewed.
That's hilarious. And you're absolutely right.
Well, you're swapping your health for doom scrolling. And then when you're not feeling very well, you can tell everybody on social media that you don't feel great today, you're ill again, you've got to go to the doctors again, you can't get an appointment, you are back in the hospital again. Look at what you're eating and look at what you're doing with your time. If you're just going to scroll on your phone and eat crap, then don't expect to be around when your great grandchildren appear. You're going to be long gone.
This guy, how much of the modern medical system do you trust, if any? Like, say you break your arm, will you go to the doctor, or like do you just avoid it completely?
I think if you break something, you've got little option, haven't you? I recently had kidney stones, and if anybody's had them that's watching this, they'll know that is quite painful. I mean, the first time I had them, they said to me, "Congratulations, you now know what it's like to experience contractions during childbirth. The pain level is the same as going into labor." I was like, "Shit, I know what my wife's been through twice now." But what I did was, there is a very, very well-respected former general practitioner, worked for the National Health Service. He's a Chinese gentleman. He's doctor here in the southwest of England. Someone contacted him for me, said that I had kidney stones, and I was moments away from ringing an ambulance because I was at home on my own. My wife was working away. And they said, "Can you control the pain for another 24 hours?" I said, I'm throwing up constantly. This was only about a month ago. And I said, I am struggling and I'm on my own. I don't know what to do. And they said, "Hang on in there." And they ordered, they got 3 different natural remedies from him that were made into tablets. And he emailed what they were and a website to get them from. They delivered them within 24 hours to my house. I took these tablets. They were all natural. And I had to do a course, 3 tablets 3 times a day. They were tiny little things. And they only cost me about, what would they be in dollars? Maybe something like $15. And 24 hours later, I passed the kidney stones. So I went from ringing for an ambulance to passing them within 24 hours. So do I go to the doctors? No, I've not been to the doctors for years. I mean, 2020 showed everybody that there are the majority of doctors out there will stick something in your veins that's going to kill you and don't care. They'll just do what they're told. But there are some good ones out there that walked away from the health service and started practicing more holistic or practicing privately and giving people genuine advice. But don't get me wrong, if you break your arm, you're going to need to get someone to put it in to reset it for you and put it in a cast. I understand that you'll need to go to a hospital, but you don't need to go to a doctor for that. But if I found out there was something seriously wrong with me, then I would go to my friend in Ireland who's got a Tesla machine and a hyperbaric chamber. I would go there. That's the treatment I would be looking for. I would be, if I was diagnosed with cancer tomorrow, if I had a tumor, then I would use, Tesla machine to get rid of that. I did obviously immediately go vegan, and I would be on that Tesla machine as much as I possibly could. So I wouldn't be going anywhere near a hospital for that treatment.
What do you believe in infrared treatment as well? I have an infrared light gun right now. Do you like the infrared treatment? Because I hear a lot of good stuff about infrared.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's all to do with frequency. Ultimately, we're talking about frequency, and there is also electrical devices out there. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of TENS machines, but a lot of women when they're pregnant will have a TENS machine. Which puts pads on their back. People have used those for back problems and all sorts of things. So electricity can heal. But ultimately, it's all to do with frequency. It's using frequency. So yeah, if you get seriously ill, I mean, chemotherapy ultimately is mustard gas. It's mustard gas. It's designed to kill you. So most people that are terminally ill with cancer, it isn't the cancer that kills them. That's a tumor that's growing, that's protecting you from the toxins in it. The moment you burst that to take a biopsy, it's going to leak. They then use chemotherapy to literally kill you. So it won't be the cancer that kills you. It tends to be the chemotherapy that's the cause of it. So you've got to look at these things. If you've got, for example, a cancerous tumor, they're not going to know it's cancerous unless they take a biopsy. They then remove the tumor. If it's benign, they'll remove it anyway. So why not remove the tumor and then conduct the biopsy? Why don't they conduct the biopsy while it's still inside you and puncture it? That tumor is protecting your body from that liquid leaking out, the toxins leaking out. The moment they puncture that, that's when the problems start and it spreads. So whatever you do, do consider. I'm not saying follow my advice, but do consider looking at alternative therapies. But yeah, I mean, if I was diagnosed with something serious tomorrow, I would be on the next flight to Ireland to my friend's centre. He's got a wellbeing centre in Ireland, and I would be on that Tesla machine. I'd be in the oxygen chamber. I would be doing all of that stuff like they did in Tartaria. I'd be doing exactly the same thing.
Wow, this has been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. I think the audience really enjoyed this. Someone even gave a super chat. So thank you to Ewan the Terrible. And she says here, I just want to put this comment on the stage. She says, I love your channel, guy. So,
thank you.
Yeah, so
thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Do you want to tell people how they can get your books and follow you and all that? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. They can, if they want signed copies of my books, you can get them from my website. I don't think it's up here, but I entered it when I came on. But it's www.thetartarianempire.co.uk. thetartarianempire.co.uk. But you can get my books online as well. There you go. Yeah. So you can get them online. So you can get them from Amazon. I had to use Amazon because no one would publish my books when they first came out. I now got a publisher that publishes them in Germany, Poland, and Japan, but I can't get an English publisher to touch them. So I had to use Amazon. It was the best route to market for me. And people say to me, oh, you say all these things, but you're supporting Amazon. And I always say the same thing. I don't support Amazon. Amazon pay me.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good way to be.
I'm getting money out of Jeff. Jeff pays me every month. I want a bit of Jeff's cash. But it was the only route really that I had. So I'll continue to use Amazon to publish my books because it's print on demand. So there are no upfront costs. I hit a much wider audience, and at the same time, Amazon have to give me money. And I think that makes a nice bloody change, doesn't it? We've given them so much money. It's nice when every month they send me a paycheck.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, this was amazing. And I'd love to have you back on again. And thank you, everybody, who tuned in today and will watch in the future. And guys, if you can support the podcast, the links are in the description. And thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Guy. And have a good night.
You're welcome.